Is it possible that Ferrari is rising from the ashes just when it needs it most? After a near-catastrophic start to the season with technical errors, a scandalous double disqualification, and an internal reputational crisis, the Maranello team has arrived at Suzuka with a new attitude and a car that's finally starting to show signs of life. But is this just a passing mirage, or are we witnessing the SF25's turning point? Today, we're going to take a detailed look at everything that happened in practice for the Japanese Grand Prix and what's behind Ferrari's supposed rebirth. Stay until the end because there are many details, key technical decisions, and hidden strategies that could define the rest of the championship. And before we get into the nitty-gritty, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Ferrari will be able to consistently fight for podium finishes again this season? Ferrari arrived at the 2025 Japanese Grand Prix carrying a much heavier burden than the 799 kilos that cost Charles Leclerc his disqualification in China. It's a case of accumulated pressure, an open wound that began to bleed from the very start of the season. The most iconic team in Formula One history kicked off this championship with a combination of technical errors, a lack of strategic execution, and a media storm that has given them no respite. We're not talking about a simple bad weekend. China was a total collapse that exposed shortcomings that, in theory, should have been resolved by now for a team that aspires to return to the top. In Shanghai, Ferrari wasn't just penalized on the sporting front. It suffered a technical setback that left it completely exposed to the press, rivals, and its own fans. Lewis Hamilton, having achieved an important victory in Saturday's sprint, a silver lining in a stormy sky, was disqualified after the main race due to excessive wear on the floorboards of his SF25. Post-race measurements showed a thickness of just 8.6 millimeters, below the regulatory minimum of 9 millimeters, which automatically triggered the penalty. Leclerc, meanwhile, was disqualified after his car was found to be 1 kilogram under the legal minimum weight. And while some might think these are minor errors, the truth is that such infractions are the equivalent of failing the foundations of a house that was supposed to be finished. The situation became even more tense when team principal Fred Vasseur harshly criticized FOM, the entity responsible for F1's television production, for having manipulated radio clips between Hamilton and his engineer. Instead of showing the full message where Lewis offered to let Leclerc pass because he was struggling with the car, the only thing broadcast was a blunt phrase, "I'll let you know when we make the swap," generating a completely different narrative. A narrative that painted Hamilton as rebellious, as disobedient, and that insinuated tensions within the team when in reality, the full context showed coordination and professionalism. This episode not only fueled external criticism but also sowed internal doubts about Ferrari's communication management and its ability to protect itself from this type of scandal. Added to this was the fact that the technical explanations offered after the disqualification were disturbing. Ferrari acknowledged that they did not have complete race simulation data for Hamilton, the result of a technical issue during pre-season testing. This meant that they arrived at the race in China with a void of critical information that left them completely vulnerable to any variation in the circuit or track conditions. And as expected, the consequence was a car height calibration error that resulted in a penalty. All of this contributed to Ferrari arriving at Suzuka not only with the urgency of scoring points, but also with the need to rebuild its credibility as a team. They found themselves in a perilous fifth position in the Constructors' Championship, 61 points behind McLaren, and with a car that had yet to consistently show its true potential. The disaster in China was, for many within the Scuderia, a breaking point. A brutal wake-up call that forced the technical team to rethink not only the SF25's configurations, but also their work philosophy, communication strategy, and the way they approach race weekends. Therefore, the trip to Japan wasn't a simple transfer to the next destination on the calendar. It was a kind of announced redemption, a deliberate attempt to change the course of a season that, if it continues along the same basic path of errors, could end in oblivion. With this context in mind, what happened in the Suzuka practice sessions takes on a new meaning. It wasn't just about setting good times, but about showing that Ferrari is still alive, that it can react, that it can evolve, and most importantly, that it can be feared again. After weeks of frustration and errors that distanced them from the goals set at the beginning of the season, Ferrari showed technical performance at Suzuka that many in the paddock are quick to describe as the first spark of recovery. And it's not simply about competitive lap times, although that also matters, but about something much deeper. For the first time in months, the SF25 began to behave like a car with real fighting potential. We're not talking about a miraculous transformation, but there are clear signs that the changes implemented by the engineers are beginning to have an effect. In the first free practice session, FP1, Charles Leclerc placed third, while Lewis Hamilton finished fourth. Both drivers lapped less than half a second behind the day's leader, Lando Norris, who posted a solid 1 minute and 28.549 seconds in the McLaren. This first practice session was key for Ferrari not only because of the positions achieved, but also because it allowed them to validate on track many of the configurations that had been worked on with obsessive intensity in the Maranello simulator over the previous weeks. The team had tested up to 20 different setups in the simulator before landing in Japan, and the fact that 2 of those configurations worked consistently from the first contact with the Suzuka asphalt was a breath of fresh air for the technical team. The interesting thing here is that Ferrari wasn't necessarily looking to shine on the timesheets, but rather to see if the SF25 could naturally adapt to the demands of the Japanese track, one of the most technical and aerodynamically demanding on the calendar. Suzuka, with its high-speed corners like the 130R, the Snake in the first sector, and the legendary Degner, is a true laboratory for chassis stability and car balance. And what was seen in FP1 was a car that, while still not perfect, seemed to move with much more confidence in changes of direction and under difficult braking. The second free practice session, FP2, however, was a bit more eventful. 4 red flags marked the tone of a practice session in which running time was drastically reduced. Despite this, Hamilton managed to hold on to 4th place with a time of 1 minute and 28.544 seconds, just 0.430 seconds behind Oscar Piastri, the session leader. Leclerc, meanwhile, dropped to 7th place, 0.472 seconds off the best time, but in a very tight standings where any tenth of a second can completely change the picture. What's striking isn't just the position in the standings, but how the SF25 performed in interrupted track conditions. In situations like this, where teams must quickly adapt to interruptions and reorganize their work programs on the fly, the car's responsiveness becomes a barometer of its technical maturity. And on this occasion, Ferrari showed an adaptability not seen in the first 2 races of the year. The car responded well both in fast lap simulations and in longer runs with a full fuel tank. In fact, some internal race pace simulations placed the SF25 within a very competitive performance window, especially in tire wear management, which until now had been one of its most notable weaknesses. Another detail that cannot go unnoticed is the team's internal evolution. Unlike in China, where strategic chaos and a lack of internal communication dominated, Suzuka saw a much more cohesive structure. Decisions were timely, drivers communicated clearly with their engineers, and most importantly, there was a sense of control from the pit wall. It's as if Ferrari had learned the lessons of its own mistakes and for the first time this season, was operating as a top-level team, with realistic goals but unwavering ambition. This doesn't mean Ferrari is ready to dominate again, nor that the SF25 is a perfect car. But it does mean the pieces are starting to fall into place. And if recent Formula One history has shown anything, it's that a team like Ferrari, when it begins to find pace and confidence, can build momentum that takes it very far. Suzuka, then, is not just another race. It could be the starting point of a new chapter for the Scuderia. A chapter where it's no longer just about surviving in the midfield, but about fighting again at the top. After a start that left them wounded, questioned, and with a mountain to climb, Ferrari now faces one of the most critical stages of its 2025 campaign, proving that what they saw at Suzuka was not an exception, but the beginning of a deep and sustained reconstruction. The big question is not whether they can perform well in a single race, but whether they are capable of replicating that level of execution, technical consistency, and mental toughness in the more diverse scenarios still on the calendar. And to achieve this, the team needs much more than an improved car. It needs strategic solidity, firm leadership, and drivers capable of extracting every last tenth of a second from the SF25 under pressure. To date, Ferrari remains in a worrying 5th place in the Constructors' Championship, 61 points behind McLaren, which has established itself as the most effective team in tire management and race pace. This disadvantage is not only quantitative, it is also symbolic. Because it is not just about numbers on a table, but about the general feeling that Ferrari has fallen behind its direct competitors. But Formula One is a sport of constant evolution, and a 60-point gap in April is not the same as a 60-point gap in September. Everything will depend on how the pieces move in the upcoming races, and Ferrari knows it's entering a window of opportunity it can't waste. The SF25 demonstrated at Suzuka that it has a technical foundation on which to build. That, in itself, is a significant step forward compared to what was seen in Australia and China, where the car seemed more like an unanswered mystery than a competitive engineering project. But for this recovery to translate into tangible results, it will be key to maintain aggressive but consistent development. It's not just about bringing new parts to each race, but also deeply understanding how the car responds to each change, how it adapts to high-load circuits like Barcelona, low-load tracks like Montreal, or hybrid tracks like Baku. Versatility will be key. At the same time, the role of the drivers will be fundamental. Charles Leclerc, who has experienced ups and downs since the start of the season, needs to regain not only speed but also leadership within the team. Leclerc has plenty of talent, but he must reaffirm his role as the technical and emotional pillar of the project. Meanwhile, Lewis Hamilton, the season star signing, is still in a complex adaptation phase, marked by a lack of preseason data and the frustration of being disqualified just after achieving his first sprint victory with Ferrari. However, if there's one thing that defines Hamilton, it's his resilience. And if he manages to tune into the car and the team's processes, his experience could be the decisive factor in the most tactical races of the year. Furthermore, Ferrari will have to intelligently manage the media pressure that continues to grow around the team. After the scandal in China and the manipulation of radio communications by FOM, every step the team takes will be closely watched. In that sense, managing the public narrative will be as important as managing the tires. The team needs to shield itself from external noise, close ranks, and focus exclusively on what truly matters: building clean races, making sound strategic decisions, and consolidating a robust technical dynamic. If Ferrari can translate the stability shown at Suzuka into a repeatable pattern, we could see them make up ground faster than many anticipate. There are upcoming circuits that could favor the SF25 if aerodynamic progress is maintained and the car's suspension and balance settings continue to be fine-tuned. But there will also be complex challenges such as the unpredictable weather at Spa, the extreme temperatures in Mexico, or street circuits like Monaco, where every mistake is doubly costly. Ultimately, what's at stake for Ferrari in the remainder of the season isn't just a position in the standings. It's their credibility as a technical project, their authority as a historic team, and their ability to react in an increasingly unpredictable Formula One. The good news is that Suzuka has sent a clear message: they still have time. The bad news is that there's no more room to stumble again. Every race from now on will be a test of fire. And only the truly great teams know how to respond when the margin for error disappears. And so we come to the end of this exhaustive analysis of Ferrari's current situation in this complex, unpredictable, and highly competitive 2025 season. What happened at Suzuka shouldn't be interpreted as a magic bullet or a definitive indication that Ferrari is back, but it is a clear sign that something is moving at Maranello. For the first time in months, there's a sense of direction. There's a plan. There are meaningful technical adjustments, there are committed drivers, there's self-criticism, and above all, there's a desire to evolve. And in a category as ruthless as Formula One, sometimes that's the most important thing. Not to remain static, not to surrender to the narrative of failure, not to accept that mistakes define you. In recent weeks, Ferrari has been swept away by a seemingly unstoppable current of skepticism. The double disqualification in China was a brutal blow that left internal and external scars. The headlines focused more on the mistakes than the nuances. The narrative leaned dangerously toward mockery and disappointment, as if the 2025 project were doomed before the fourth race. But the team has shown at Suzuka that it is willing to fight for its technical and sporting dignity. Not with bombastic declarations, but with on-track deeds. With concrete improvements. With smart adjustments. With a car that is finally beginning to respond. This, of course, doesn't mean everything is resolved. Ferrari still has a long way to go. It must recover points, close the gaps with the leaders, demonstrate strategic solidity, and avoid repeating execution errors. Performance must be sustained on circuits with very different characteristics. We must continue to refine the understanding between drivers and engineers. And we must do this without letting the media hype distract attention from what's truly important. Competing, evolving, rebuilding from within. But most importantly, Ferrari now has a different narrative to build on. A narrative of resilience, adaptation, and progressive improvement. A narrative that gives back to the team and its fans a word that in Formula One can be as powerful as a new front wing or an optimized engine map. Hope. And so, if you've made it this far, I want to know your opinion. Do you think Ferrari can maintain this upward trend? Or was Suzuka just a fleeting illusion before returning to frustration? I'll read you in the comments. I want to know how you see this evolution. And if you like this analysis, you know what's coming. Subscribe, activate the bell, and join us in the next videos because we'll be following every step of this season with the level of detail and passion it deserves. And for the next chapter, get ready because we're going to break down one of the most controversial decisions of the year. Red Bull's unexpected driver change, the Tsunoda Lawson effect, and Verstappen's silent fury. Is Red Bull digging its own grave from within? Don't miss it.